welcome to another live stream. Let me check my microphone and everything working. Okay, so in today's video, we're going to talk about error handling. It's one of the few things that most programmers we tend to not particularly pay attention to, but in this live stream I'm going to go over some of the core practices, some of the practices that you can use when you're dealing with issues with error handling. Alright, so some of the, let's create notes.txt. Some of the things that might probably come up when you are coding with regards to error is some programmer's error, and then we have also operational errors. All right. Programmer's errors are like things that errors that can come from things like you, the programmer, having to make errors yourself, as in if you fail to define a variable or other stuff, or typography error and those likes. All right. Then operational errors are errors that you anticipate to happen. Let's say if user is not found or incorrect password, all of these things. So operational errors mostly are errors that anticipate. So double C. Where is my English teacher? Anyway, you anticipate that might probably happen, but you then have to you then bring up codes to deal with circumstances like that. So all right. So that being said, let's go through how you can probably handle issues like that when they come up. All right, so to start with, I've created a folder with the name error handling here, and then in here, then we are going to initialize npm so that we can be able to install our packages. To start with, I'm going to use express, so we npm install express. That's the framework we are going to use to create our server. Anyway, all right, so we have express installed. Then I'll also want to create a file with the name server.js. So we have our file in here, server.js, and then let's console.log server started. Right. Then back in the package.json, in our script, we are going to say server, and then we say nodemon server.js. I've already installed nodemon globally, so this is what we are going to use to watch our server file when we make any changes in the server file. All right. But then if you've not installed that, you can do npm i-d, which is a development dependency, and then you do nodemon. Or you can also do -g and then nodemon. The difference is that one is going to install it globally, and then the other one is going to install it as a dependency. All right, so let's run the server script. When you say npm run server, let's make this a little bit bigger. npm run server. Yeah, and then our server has started with the console.log server started. All right, to create our server, let's bring in express, require express, and then let's initialize express, and then also what we want is the port that the server will listen to, which will be the port. I mean, if we are using something like a .env file or 5000, so we can then do app.listen at our port, and then pass in a callback function and say console.log server running on port, then we bring in our port, Alright. So what did we do wrong? Oh, yeah. Right. Application crashed. One sec. Command C, clear npm run server. Oh, express on P. Alright, then we do app.listen on our port, and then we console.log server started on port, like that. Okay, so when we check the terminal, we have the port starting at port 5000. So if we should change this to 8, we will be probably listening at 8000. Okay, so but then I like to keep it at 5000. Okay, so then error handling. All right, so let's create an endpoint where we can get users, where we pass our controller, mostly our controller request response, and then we return and write res.status, but let's say 200.json, and then have a message. Let's say get all users. Simple as that. So have an extension that I use to get to make simulate request, which I think it is REST file, REST client. Yeah. All right, so with that, what happens is that I then have to create the request.rest file, and then in here we can say get users, and then we simulate a get request, and then do http local host for 5000, and then we want the users. All right, so we can then send off the request like that, and then we have a response coming in as this. All right, so now that we've created the endpoint, let's say let's assume that we are trying to get users from a database, and then we get a situation where there are no users. All right, so typically what you would do is you write if not users, we want to return rest the status of, let's say, 400, and then a JSON message of users not found, something like that. All right, so if we simulate the get request again, we are going to get the response like this. All right, but then again, to another way of having to deal with something like this will probably be we probably would then have to throw, let's say, throw new error, and then we say user not found, and then we return as the status, let's say 400, which is a bad request, and then a JSON message of users not found, like that. But watch what happens in the terminal when we throw the error with a message of user not found. So when we send off that, we then get we still get the error message, which is user not found, but we do not get a response coming in from the server like we did previously. So then how then do we use this? All right, with Express, there is a built-in error handler which we can use as a middleware. What do I mean by that? Okay, so let's start off by creating a folder by naming it middleware, and then error handler JS, like that, and JS, like that. Right, let's delete this one. All right, let's delete this. Okay, so let's create the folder with the name middleware, and then from there we create a new file by saying error handler camel case error handler.js. I can type today, so we then define the function by calling it error handler, which takes 3 parameters. Usually, typically, a middleware will take a request response and then a next parameter. But then with the built-in error handling with Express, it takes 4 parameters, which then will pass the error here. All right, so it's the only parameter which takes 4 parameters when it comes to Express. All right, so what we can then do is that we return where's the status of, let's say, 400, and then that message, the JSON, with a message of error, that message. Then how then do we use this error handler? First of all, let us export the error handler, and then to use it, we then have to come into the server file, and then under our route, we then use it by saying that app.use error handler, which is then imported from the top which is this. All right, let's clear up. All right, cool. So with the same code, when we come back here and then we send off the message, realize that our app does not crash like it used to when we did not have the error handler being used here as a middleware. Then also another situation that can come up is, let's say mostly when we are trying to get data from a database, we then have to use an async function, which then have to perform something like a promise or to promise to return data from the database. But immediately you write an async function here, and then we simulate the get request again. Realize that we then still get to have the same problem coming up again, where the error is thrown. One sec. The error is thrown here, but we do not get response from the server. A workaround it is then we have to put our code in a try catch method. One sec. Try catch block, and then put the code here, our controller code here, and then pass a second parameter with the next as an argument, and then we which the error then will be caught in the catch block, and do the error dot message, and then we pass the next with the error, like that. So let's go over the code. So we then to make things easier, for us to understand the code. So what we are saying is that when we get to this endpoint, which is the users, we have an async operation with a request response and the next argument. And then in a situation where we are trying to simulate a situation where there's a problem getting the users, we want to throw a new error with user not found. Let's take out this. Yeah, we would throw a new error with user not found, and then if there is a user, then we return this. All right. So back in the request.rest file, when we send off the request, still gets this. And when you check the terminal, we do not have a situation where the error is thrown in the console and your application crashes. All right. So another way we can further make this more abstract. So situations where you are defining other, you are defining other endpoints, then it will mean that we typically would have to always be writing a try catch block, and then having to put our code in, our controller code in the try block, and then we'll then have to catch the error here. But most times we typically might be having to be performing a lot of business logic, where in the error there might be several errors that we are trying to process. But then again, let's deal with a situation where we do not always typically want to write the try catch error and then have an abstract way of having to deal with not writing the try catch block. What do I mean by that? All right, let's first of all create a new folder here and name it utils, and then create a new file, try-catch.js, and then define the try-catch like this. And then in here we want to run a controller function which then passes an async function with a request response and then the next. Yeah, so we then write our try-catch here, try-catch block here. We await the running of the controller function with the request response, and then in here when there is an error we process the error with the next. So what we're trying to do is to run the controller function, that is the logic that we'll define, and then it returns a function that runs the controller logic with the request and then response. And then if there is an error, we want to pass the error with the next parameter, which is the middleware here. All right, how then do we use it? We then do module.export equals our own try-catch. Yeah, and then back in here, let's define another endpoint. Let's say app.post/login, and instead of typically writing our request response, what we will do is that we will then wrap it in our try-catch function that we created with the request response, which is an async function. And then let's say user equals to false, and then you say if not user, we want to throw new error and say user not found, or let's something like this. Or we want to, if we want to return where's the status of 200 if it's successful, and then JSON with a message, say get user, something like that. All right, so in the end, let's go back to the request file and then simulate a post request. So let's say login user, so which should be a post request, and then typically you pass data for the post request, but we are only trying to simulate a situation where we are only making just a typical post request. So HTTP localhost port 5000 and then login, like that. All right, so when we should send off this request, we get user not found. So what we then realize is that we then do not need to define our try-catch. Where is it? Let me close this. All right, we don't need then to always define our try-catch block here. I'll make it smaller. We don't need to define our try-catch block like we did here. We only bring in our abstract function of our try-catch, which we defined in here, which then runs the controller function and then returns a function with a request response, which then is passed through the controller, and then when there's an error, it is caught here with the error. Typically simple. Right. Another workaround is also having to install a package that I really find it useful as npm I express-async-handler. Express-async-handler. And then let's clear, then run it again. Alright. In this situation, let's define another endpoint again. So let's say we want to do app post to, let's say, register. What then we can pass here is to, instead of having to define our own try catch, what then is to bring in the express-async handler. So we can say async handler equals to require express-async handler in here, and then we wrap our controller function, or is it? Yeah, we wrap our async controller function with the async handler. Should be an async with the request. With the request and response as our parameter. But in this situation, we do not pass our next argument, and then typically we will say, let's say, if we probably would, in a situation where we are running, trying to create a user, we probably will say const name equals to request.body.name. But let's just say we do not pass the name. So then we say if not name, we then want to throw new error and say please provide a name, like that. Other than that, we want to return rest status of 200 son with a message and say user created, something like that. Alright, so let's go back into the request file and then create another request, simulate another request again, and say create user, and then which is a post request. Yes. Which is a post request, and then it should be HTTP local host port 5000, and then there's a register. What was the endpoint? Check the endpoint. Yeah, register. So we don't need this for now. Yeah. So if we should send off the request, it does the same thing. So 3 scenarios, different ways of handling it. So in the first one, which is the getting of the users, we have our async function with a request response, and then next, which then we define a try catch, and with the logic here, and if there is no user, we throw the new error with user was not found, which then is caught in the catch block. We console.log the error with the message, and then we run the next middleware, which is the error middleware that we defined here. The error middleware is going to run regardless, because down here in our route we are using it here. All right, so another scenario could be that we can all abstract our try catch. Another way of dealing with this is that we can also abstract our own try catch block, and then pass in our request, our controller function, and then throw the error when there is an error. And in that situation, we then create our own abstract try catch here, where we run the controller function, which returns another function with the request response and then the next, and then write our try catch block once, running the controller function, and then if there is an error, we pass the error to the next middleware, which is the error handler function, which then returns the error, the message that we are trying to return. Pretty simple. All right. Okay. But then let's also try and then take this further, because what then will happen is that mostly we'll tend to handle different error situations. Some of it might be ones that we would want to send back to the user, or one that we would want to just log it into the or log it and save it to a file, and then check up on it later and work on it. But to make such distinction, let's say that we're trying to do like app.get /product. All right, so in this situation, we wrap it. Let's try and use the async handler here, and then in here we run the async request response, and well, let's say cause product equals to false. All right, so what I want to do is to create my own custom error, such that when there is an error, I know that the error is coming from my custom error, other than it being a generic error coming from somewhere else. What do I mean by that? Let's come back here and then create a file folder back saying errors, and then in here we say app error.js. So we define a class with app error, which extends the base error, and then with a constructor with the error type, and then message, and then error code. Let's say status code. All right, we then say super with the message, and then this dot error type equals to error type, and then this dot status code equals to the status. we can also do something like object.set prototype, but we're not going to do that. That's a little bit complicates things. But from there, then how then do we use it? We then export this to be up arrow, and then back in the server file we can say something like if not product, we want to throw new up arrow, and then let's bring in our up arrow. Okay, it's already being imported here. Throw new up arrow, and then where were we? Yeah, new up arrow with the arrow type, let's say bad request, and then messages products not found, and then status code, let's say 400. All right. But then if there is, we want to return where's the status of 200, and then a JSON with the message, let's say get all product. All right, how then do we use this? So back in the arrow handler, what we can then do is that we can bring in the up arrow, which is in the arrow, and then up arrow, and then we say that if arrow instance of up arrow, what we want to do is return what we want to do is bring the structure from let's make it simple. Let's what we want to do is destructure the arrow type, the message, and then status code from the arrow, and then return rest status of the status code, and then JSON with the arrow type, with the message, with the arrow type, and then the message here. All right, pretty much simple. So let's simulate a post. Did I get request? Yeah, I get request to the endpoint product. So when we come in here, write a comment, get product, which is a post request. It goes to HTTP local host port 5000 to product. But moment of truth, sign up the request. We cannot make post request. oh, sorry, it's a get request here, which is that. Sorry, send off the request. Yeah, then we get the error type, which is a bad request, product not found, like that. We can also create something like, let's say, validation error.js, like that, and same principle, class validation error, sorry, which extends the base error, and then with the constructor of, let's say, error type, same thing, and then message, and then status code, and then we say this dot message. So we run these supers with the message, and then we say this dot error type equals to error type, and this dot status code equals to the status code. What then we can also do is, let's say, run a function that will say serialize let's say format error with, let's say, format error, like that, and return, let's say, it can return anything, let's say, with the error, with this dot error type, and then errors will be an array with the errors. So probably might be a function that we would want to run based on if we are running, how do you call it? Let's say message error 1, something like that. All right, so we can then consume this by exporting equals to validation error. So realize that you can be as creative as you'd want with when you're trying to handle errors in Express. All right. How then do we consume this? Let's go back and then try and create an endpoint to create a product. So let's say we have an endpoint where we have app.post to the endpoint of product. We want to run an async handler, which then runs an async function with a request response. And then let's make this a little bit interesting by having to install Joy to do our validation for us. All right, so npm run server, like that. All right, so back up here, we bring in Joy. All right, so in the creation of the product, where we can say product schema equals to joy.object what we want is the name should be joy string, and then what's required, and then what we want is the user ID. Now what we want is the name, price. We want joy dot number, and then should be required. All right, so with joy, what you can then do from here is returns to argument with the error, and then the validation from the product schema. We validate, let's say, request that body, and then we say abort early should be false. All right, so if there is an error, come on, we then want to throw new validation error with the type being validation, and then the messages we can then pass the error here, but we're not going to do that just for the sake of simplicity, because we can get the errors from the validation from joy with errors.details like that. And then let's just pass generic message here. Let's say there was a validation, cool, error, and then pass a code of 400. Right. Other than that, we then other than that, we return where's the status of 201 201, then JSON with the message of, let's say, product created. But for us to be able to use the request.body, what then we have to do is to set up our middleware. And say app.use express JSON like that. All right. But to be fair, what you can also do is that we can just create a controller function and then put all of this in a controller function, but we're not going to do this today. All right, so let's simulate a request to the end, a post request to product, and then let's see what we get. All right, so back up in the request.json file, let's say create product, which is a post request, and then in here is HTTP localhost port 5000 to product, and then in the content type is application /JSON, and then with the content, what I want is the name, keep it empty, and then price, I keep it empty like that. So we also forgot to handle the to do this quickly. All right, so let's bring in the validation errors const validation error. We require it from the errors and then validation error. So from there we can then also write the same thing and say where is it? This one goes up to that. Okay, so we can then say if the error is an instance of validation, if it's an instance of the validation error, we then want to destructure by bringing in an error type, then once the message, and then status code. Let's check the what did we write for the validation? Okay, want the error type, the message, status code. You might probably would want to switch it up a bit based on the kind of errors that you want to return to the user. But there's another interesting topic that I would probably make a video on, with how to the architecture of how to design errors so that the front-end developer will always know the type of error that might probably be returned by the from the server. Okay, so we want to return REST status with the status code, and then a JSON message of with the JSON message of where's that status with the status code to const. Oh, sorry. Destructure it from the error. Right. So we want to return status of the status code, and then a JSON with the, let's say, message with the message. Let's keep it simple, and then the errors, let's say with an array of, let's say, error 1, let's say validation error 1, and then another validation error 2, something like that. All right, so let's go back to our request.rest function file. Send off the request. We have an issue. What's the problem? So it's not callable. What did we do wrong? Did we export the validation error? Yeah, we did. So we say if error instance of validation error. What about the validation error here? All right. I think we've done everything right. Okay, let's send up the request again. Why are we getting this? Sorry. Side of instance is not callable. Right hand side of instance is not callable. What? Did you export it? Export. Files and elevation. Oh, there. You don't need this. Validation now. If instance of validation error, why is it not callable? Okay, let's go back here. Send this. Command C. This works. The arrow, which is this. The arrow, yeah, which is this. Instance of validation error. Sometimes you be tripping in it. Okay, wait. Let's go with this. Okay. Yeah, bring in a validation error like that. If the error instance of validation error, let's keep it basic, return where's the status 400 JSON the message, sorry, validation. Like that. Why are we getting this error? Right side of instance callable. Anyway, but basically what I'm trying to say is how we can handle errors when it comes to express.js. All right, thanks for watching. Stay blessed.